So, we are going to Colombia!
You guys, he's really excited. I am too, but he's really excited.
Little did I know that in 7 hours later, I would find myself in Colombia only to be sent right back to the United States. Before I proceed, it is important that I address in this video why I was heading to Colombia. Growing up, I've always been intrigued by the country. Its history and culture is so different from my own. You know, a lot of people dream of traveling to Paris, Tokyo, Barcelona, Geneva. Mine was Colombia. And in the fall of last year, the stars just aligned for me to go. 2 of my friends from college were also able to join me on this trip. Carpe diem. So, on August 27, 2019, which was a Tuesday, my friend Greg and I departed Philadelphia at 4:05 p.m. Eastern Time, and we arrived at Bogotá El Dorado International Airport at midnight local time. Per usual, when you arrive in a foreign country, you have to go through customs. Eventually, it was Greg's and my turn to proceed to the customs counter. The customs officer seemed to be taking longer than usual processing our information. The people who were waiting in line behind us were actually getting through the customs checkpoint before us. And in the end, it was just Greg and myself. Even at that point, I still thought nothing of it. The thought of not being able to enter the country never once crossed my mind. And what seemed like over an hour, the customs officer announced that one of us will be allowed to enter the country and the other must return back to the point of origin effective immediately. I was the person who had to go home. At this point, the both of us were just shook. Greg was like, if Matthew has to go back, I too will return back with him. The customs officer were like, no, Greg, you must go through. Matthew, you must go back. No discussion, end of story. Greg was whisked away to the arrival hall while I to some back office at the airport. The customs officer told me that I was in the process of being deported and they were putting me on the next flight out of Colombia, which was 6 later that morning. The reason why Greg was able to enter the country is because he is American. I, on the other hand, am not. I hold a Malaysian passport, and Malaysian nationals, by Colombian law, are required to have a visa in order to enter the country. You must be wondering, Matthew, how could you be so stupid and not check the visa requirements prior to your trip? That is a fair question. I did what I assume many of you would do. Go onto Google, type in, are citizens of so-and-so country required to have a visa in order to travel to XYZ destination? I found myself on this webpage. The citizens of the following nationalities do not need a visa to enter Colombia as a tourist for up to 90 days. Malaysia. Ah, great! And to cross-reference what I had read online, I reached out to a friend from Malaysia who also traveled to Colombia in the year before. I asked him if he needed a visa in order to travel to Colombia. No, he did not. Perfect. I've done my due diligence. I do not need a visa to travel to Colombia. So what happened was, at the beginning of 2019, Colombia amended their law to require citizens of certain countries, including Malaysia, to have a visa in order to enter their country. So what I read online was actually outdated, and what my friend told me was old news. He did not require a visa to travel to Colombia then. But things have changed. So I asked the customs officer if there was any way possible for me to get my visa in a day, and she was like, no, you have to go back home and it takes 2 to 3 weeks for the visa to be processed. And then they took me to an even more secluded space at the airport and they just left me there. There was nothing but a bench to sleep on and the lights were fluorescent bright. At this point, I was so tired, so I was like half asleep and half thinking, oh my gosh, I'm gonna end up like Sandra Bland and I am going to die in this cell. But I did not die. At 5:30 in the morning, they woke me up and they escorted me to the plane that was to depart Bogotá at 6 a.m. At 4 p.m. on Wednesday, August the 28th, I returned back to Philadelphia. I'm now back to square one. I'm back at my apartment and I was like, incredibly devastated. At that point, I could just stay in bed and cry for the rest of the week, or I could do something to change the circumstance that I was in. I chose to keep fighting. And so I went on my computer, I researched all the things I needed to do to get a Colombian visa, and I was sure to be on the consulate's website this time around. Apparently, you could file for your visa online, and so I did it. These are the items that they require. I'm just gonna summarize it for you. Keep in mind, do not take my words as Bible. If you're filing for a visa, you should always consult the consulate directly. But at the time of my application, number one, I needed to submit a copy of my passport. Number two, a passport photo. Number three, my bank statements for the past 6 months. Number four, a written letter to the consulate explaining to them why I'm going to the country and declaring that I'm able to hold my own financially. So, I took a shower, I dragged myself to the nearest CVS to take my passport photo, and spent the whole night filing the application. I submitted the application online, and just like what every single customs officer in Colombia had told me, the website also stated that it takes at least 2 weeks for the visa to be processed. But I was like, I do not have 2 weeks to wait. I needed to talk to someone ASAP. 6 a.m. rolls around. I took my backpack, the same backpack that I've been carrying from Philadelphia to Colombia, Colombia to Philadelphia. I had no idea how the rest of my day would play out. I might end up back in my apartment in a few hours, I might not. And so, I arrived in Newark 2 hours later and Ubered directly to the consulate of Colombia. I asked a front desk worker, is it possible for me to get my Colombian visa today? And she was like, nope, it takes 2 to 3 weeks. But you can ask the consulate officer. I went to speak with the consulate officer and just poured to him my entire story, just as how I'm sharing it with you guys right now. He was super professional, super empathetic, and he said to me, okay, you can come back to pick up your visa next Tuesday, the day after Labor Day, which was actually much sooner than the 2 to 3 weeks that everyone had been telling me thus far. But I was like, no sir, that's when I'm supposed to be returning back from Colombia. I need the visa today. He took my passport and went to the back of his office. I waited and waited for maybe a good 15 to 30 minutes. He returned to his desk and handed me my passport and a piece of paper. He said to me, your visa has been approved. I was like, oh my gosh, I freaking did it. Now, I have the visa in my hands. I went straight to Newark International Airport and rehashed to the ticket agents everything that I've been through. Like a scene right out of The Amazing Race, I got my tickets in the nick of time. Deja vu. At midnight, 48 hours later, Matthew lands in Bogotá once again. At this point, I was so tired, so nervous, and just filled with adrenaline. I walked towards customs. On the inside, I was like, all you people said that I could not get my visa in a day. And I was like, guess what? I got it! And I'm back, my I went up to the customs counter yet again. And this time the officer looked at my passport, looked at my visa, looked at me, and my heart was just pounding. And then she stamped my passport and I was let through. As you can imagine, this was an incredibly traumatic experience for me. The reason why I chose to do this video is because we are now living through uncertain and unprecedented times. Now, more than ever, we need to be extra careful and extra thorough with our research before we travel. I hope you guys will learn from my mistakes. One key error that I made was the source of my information. If you guys were to look carefully, the website that I was on was not the official consulate's or embassy's website. It was a third-party website, and so the information that they had available was not the most up-to-date. And even if you were to find yourself in a pickle like I did, know that there is a way around it. Just as with any other pursuit in life, if you really want your vacation, you gotta fight for it. Do not give up until you've truly exhausted all your options. And in case you guys are wondering, my time in Colombia was amazing. I think Colombia has gotten a bad rap far longer than the country deserves. When people think of Colombia, they think drug trade, Pablo Escobar, social unrest, violence. But during my time there, I saw nothing but good, friendly people. Yes, it is unfortunate that I was denied entry into the country. But the way I see it, I find comfort knowing that Colombia is a country that upholds their rule of law. It is just unfortunate that I drew the short end of the stick. Travel safely and do comment below to share with me some of your travel horror stories. And to the people of Colombia, su país es hermoso. Volveré.